My name is Amelia, and if anyone had told me that a simple visit to an SAA one summer afternoon would change my life forever, I wouldn't have believed them. At 38, I had settled into a life of quiet dissatisfaction. Marrying Thomas, a wealthy man almost 20 years older than me, seemed like the sensible choice. He was charming, successful, and promised me stability, everything my past relationships lacked. But as the years went on, the spark we once shared faded, overshadowed by his constant business trips and lack of emotional connection. I was left to roam our vast estate alone in a marriage that felt more like a business deal. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one, and don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. Then there was Ethan, Thomas's son from his first marriage. At 22, Ethan was everything his father wasn't. He was youthful, energetic, and remarkably insightful. After finishing college, he had moved back home, claiming it was to save money before beginning his career, but I had a feeling there was more to his return than he let on. Ethan had a magnetic energy that made it impossible to ignore his presence. Whether it was his sharp humor, the easy confidence in his smile, or the way his deep blue eyes seemed to pierce through me, he was captivating. Despite my best efforts to keep things proper, his stepmother, his father's wife, the undeniable tension between us grew stronger every day. It was one of those oppressively hot summer days when the house felt suffocatingly quiet. Thomas was away again, leaving Ethan and me alone. I spent the morning cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, flipping through books I had no interest in. By the afternoon, the heat was unbearable, and I remembered the SAA by the pool house, a part of the estate I rarely used. I slipped on a silk robe over my swimsuit and walked to the SAA. The cedar-scented air surrounded me, and the quiet hum of the heating unit eased my restless thoughts. I closed my eyes and let the warmth soak into my skin, letting the solitude calm me. Minutes passed until I heard the door slide open. I opened my eyes to see Ethan walking in, a towel wrapped loosely around his hips. "I didn't know anyone else used this thing," he said casually, a smirk tugging at his lips. "What are you doing here?" I responded sharply. "I could ask you the same thing." He leaned against the wall. "I thought you didn't like this." "I don't," I admitted, "but today's an exception." He shrugged and sat down on the bench opposite me. His presence filled the small space. His toned body and damp hair drew my attention. No matter how hard I tried to look away, we sat in silence, the heat amplifying the tension between us. After a while, Ethan broke the silence. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer. I hesitated. "Why do you ask?" "You've seemed off lately," he said, "like something's bothering you." "It's nothing," I lied, hoping to divert his concern. "Is it my dad?" he pressed, his tone filled with concern. "You don't have to pretend with me, Amelia. I can see it." His honesty caught me off guard. "He's always gone," I admitted softly. "Sometimes it feels like I don't even exist to him anymore." Ethan leaned closer, his face serious. "You deserve more than that. You deserve to be seen, to be appreciated." His words sent a shiver down my spine. Despite the heat, I looked away, unsure of how to respond. Then I felt his hand on mine. His touch was light but reassuring. "You're not alone," he said gently. The heat in the SAA seemed to grow, though I knew it wasn't just the temperature. Ethan's touch sent a thrill through me, both exciting and terrifying. I should have pulled away, should have said something to remind us of the boundaries, but I didn't. Instead, I looked into his eyes, those intense blue eyes that always held a playful spark but now seemed deeper, more vulnerable. It felt like he could see right through me, past the role I played as Thomas's wife, to the woman I truly was underneath. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. He leaned closer still, holding my hand. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "I know this is complicated, but I can't ignore how I feel when I'm with you." His words were a confession that hung in the air between us. My heart raced as I tried to think of a response, but nothing came. All I could do was sit there, caught in the magnetic pull of his gaze. Before I could stop myself, I whispered, "This isn't right." "But it feels right," he countered, his voice steady. "Doesn't it?" I hated how much I agreed with him, how much my body betrayed my mind. The heat in the SAA was nothing compared to the warmth running through me as he leaned in closer, his face just inches from mine. "I see you, Amelia," he whispered. "Not as my father's wife, but as the incredible woman you are. And I can't pretend I don't." His words were the last straw. Without thinking, I closed the gap between us, my lips brushing his in a soft, hesitant kiss. It was gentle at first, testing the boundaries of what we both knew was wrong. But as his hand cupped my face, the kiss deepened, and all restraint melted away. The walls of the SAA seemed to close in on us, trapping us in a world where nothing else mattered but the moment we were in. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer. I let myself get lost in the intensity of it all. For the first time in years, I felt alive, desired, wanted, seen. The heat of the SAA mixed with the warmth radiating from Ethan's touch, it was intoxicating, overwhelming in a way I hadn't expected. My breath caught as his fingers brushed the fabric of my robe, hesitant but purposeful, seeking permission. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. Every rational thought was lost under the weight of the connection building between us. His lips gently tested mine, tasting, exploring. It was as though this moment was as unreal for him as it was for me. I felt his warm breath on my cheek, mirroring the frantic rhythm of my heart. His hand moved to my back, pulling me even closer. "Amelia," I murmured, my voice shaky with emotion. He pulled back slightly, enough to look me in the eyes. His blue gaze searched mine for hesitation. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice rough with desire. I couldn't. My body leaned into him, seeking the comfort and heat he offered. My hands found their way to his chest, tracing the contours of his body, memorizing the feel of him. I had spent so long denying myself, living a life of routine and emptiness. Now, he was awakening something in me with every touch, every breath. "Don't stop," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could reconsider. That was all he needed. His lips returned to mine, this time with more urgency, no hesitation. The kiss deepened, each movement a declaration of the emotions we had both kept buried for so long. His hands roamed my back, igniting trails of fire along my skin, even through the thin fabric of my robe. The heat in the SAA mixed with the heat between us, overwhelming. Sweat beaded on my forehead, but I didn't care. The world outside the wooden walls of the SAA no longer existed. There were no rules, no roles, just us. His hands found the knot of my robe, fingers pausing briefly before pulling it loose. The fabric slid from my shoulders, pooling at my feet. Instead of fear, I felt liberated. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on me, admiration shining in his eyes. "You're incredible," he said, his voice husky, filled with awe. I pulled him into another kiss, desperate to feel more, to lose myself in the emotions I had kept hidden for so long. His touch became bolder, exploring every inch of me with reverence and desire. Time seemed to stand still as we lost ourselves in each other. The outside world faded away. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel without fear, without judgment. Ethan's lips moved from mine to my neck, his kisses leaving me breathless. The creaking of the SAA door brought us back to reality. We froze, our breaths mingling as we listened intently. We waited. The silence was thick with tension. After a moment, it became clear no one was there, but the interruption reminded us of the line we were crossing. "We should." I began, but Ethan stopped me with a finger to my lips. "No regrets, Amelia," he said, his voice firm but tender. In that moment, I realized I didn't regret a thing, not the kiss, not the touch, not the emotions we had unleashed. For once, I allowed myself to feel alive, and I knew that was something I couldn't take back. But even as we gathered ourselves, the weight of what had just happened lingered. This moment of passion had opened a door we couldn't close, and the consequences were still to come. The silence between us as we left the SAA was deafening, yet it spoke volumes. The tension in the air was palpable, not from awkwardness, but from the gravity of what had just transpired. Ethan walked beside me, his hand brushing against mine occasionally, as though unsure whether to reach for it or keep his distance. Back inside the house, the world outside continued on as if nothing monumental had just happened. But inside, every glance, every small movement, carried an undeniable charge. I excused myself under the pretense of needing to check my phone and retreated to the privacy of my bedroom. I closed the door behind me, leaning against it, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My mind raced, replaying every moment in the SAA. Ethan's gaze, the intensity of his touch, the fire that refused to die within me. How had this happened? My stepson, so much younger, had awakened something in me that I thought was long buried. Guilt began to creep in, gnawing at my thoughts, but it was mingled with something else, a strange sense of liberation. This wasn't just complicated. It was dangerous. A soft knock on the door startled me. Amelia. Ethan's voice was low, hesitant. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle before opening it. Ethan stood there, his hair slightly disheveled, his expression filled with concern and longing. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for permission. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "I just need a moment to think." He took a step closer, his presence filling the room. His question hung between us, heavy with meaning, and I couldn't avoid it. "Ethan, what happened?" "It was real," he interrupted, his voice firm. "It wasn't just a fleeting moment, Amelia. You felt it too." I couldn't deny it, the connection, the passion, it was undeniable. But that didn't make it right. "We have to be careful," I said, my voice trembling, filled with doubt. "Your father." "My father doesn't see you," Ethan cut me off sharply. "He's so consumed with work and his life outside this house. You deserve more than being an afterthought." His words stung, and the loneliness I had been feeling for years surged to the surface. I found myself moving closer to him, instinctively reaching out for his touch. "Ethan," I whispered, barely audible. His hands gently cupped my face, his touch tender. "I don't care about what's right or wrong," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "I care about you." Before I could respond, his lips met mine again. This kiss was different, deeper, more desperate, as if we both understood the fleeting nature of what we had. I pulled away breathlessly, my hands resting on his chest. "Ethan, this can't be our reality," I said, my voice shaking. "We have to be careful." He nodded, but his eyes betrayed him. Determination burned in them. "I'm not letting this end, Amelia. I can't." The days that followed were filled with stolen moments and whispered confessions. We navigated the fine line between secrecy and discovery, being careful not to raise suspicion. Ethan found reasons to linger at the house, offering to help with chores or making excuses to spend time together. Every encounter was filled with tension, our touches lingering, our gazes heavy with unsaid words. The intensity of what we shared grew, and with it, the risk. One evening, as I prepared dinner, Ethan walked into the kitchen. He stood behind me, his presence overwhelming. His hands found their way to my waist, and he leaned in close, his breath warm on my neck. "Can I help with anything?" he asked, his voice teasing. I turned to face him, my heart racing. "Ethan, we can't keep doing this," I said, though my resolve was weakening. He smirked, his confidence unsettling. "Then tell me to leave, Amelia. Tell me you don't feel the same way, and I'll walk away." I couldn't bring myself to say it. One night, the inevitable happened. A text message from Ethan's father appeared on my phone. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." I sat on the couch, staring at the message, feeling the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. Ethan entered the room, seeing the troubled look on my face. "He's not coming home, is he?" Ethan asked, sitting next to me. I shook my head, unable to speak. He reached for my hand, offering silent support. "You don't have to do this alone, Amelia," he said. The vulnerability in his voice shattered the last of my defenses. I turned to him, emotions spilling over. "What are we doing, Ethan? How can this work?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled me into his arms, holding me as I let my tears fall. It happened one quiet evening, one that felt deceptively safe. Ethan and I were sitting in the living room, the space charged with the intimacy we had developed. I lit a few candles, their soft glow adding a sense of warmth and intimacy to the room. Ethan sat next to me, his hand resting lightly on my knee. It was a subtle gesture, but it spoke volumes. We spoke about nothing important, mundane things like his university assignments, the weather, and plans for the weekend. But the way he looked at me, his gaze lingering just a little too long, made even the most trivial conversation feel meaningful. Then the front door opened unexpectedly. At first, I didn't register the sound, but when I saw Thomas step through the doorway, his coat thrown over his arm, time seemed to freeze. He froze in the entryway, his eyes narrowing as they scanned the scene. First, his gaze fell on Ethan, sitting too close to me. Then his eyes moved to me, darkening as he took in the candles, the wine glasses, and the intimate atmosphere. "What's going on here?" Thomas's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. Ethan stiffened beside me, his hand pulling away from my knee. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding. "Thomas, you're home early," I stammered.